It is the year 1667, and medical science is basically just a bunch of guys in wigs guessing. Until you die. If you get sick, your local barber will probably just attach leeches to your face and hope for the best. But in France, there is a physician named Jean-Baptiste Denis who has a much worse idea. See, Denis has a massive chip on his shoulder. He went to a less prestigious university than the cool kids in Paris. And the medical elite mock him constantly. They treat him like a total joke. So, to prove he is actually the smartest guy in the room, Denis decides he is going to win the space race of the 17th century, the race to perform the first successful blood transfusion. The British had already transferred blood between two dogs, and Denis is looking at that like, oh, you think that's impressive? Watch this! He starts experimenting with his buddy Paul Emerias, transferring blood between dogs. One dog gets weak, the other dog stops barking and just acts weird. But, hey, neither of them died immediately, so that's a win in his book. But Denis isn't satisfied. He wants to be a legend. He wants to put animal blood into a human. And not just any animal. He decides the perfect donor for a sick human is a lamb. Because, obviously, lambs are the symbol of Christ. So, shooting Jesus juice directly into your veins has to be good for you, right? He finds a 15-year-old boy who has been suffering from a fever for 2 months. This poor kid has already been bled by leeches 20 times. He is basically a walking corpse. So Denis hooks him up to a sheep and pumps 12 ounces of lamb blood into the kid's arm. Amazingly, the kid survives. He wakes up the next morning feeling great. Denis is feeling like a god. He does it again with a middle-aged butcher using sheep's blood. And the guy lives. Denis is now fully convinced he has cracked the code of immortality. He is strutting around Paris like he owns the place. But then he meets Antoine Moroi. Antoine isn't sick in the traditional sense. His only real problem is that he likes to party way too much. He runs away from his wife to go clubbing in Paris, stays out all night, and drinks heavily. His wife is sick of it. She drags him to Denis and says, "Fix him." Denis looks at this guy and thinks, you know what this party animal needs? Some calf blood. Cows are calm, right? If we pump him full of cow blood, maybe he will stop going to raves and stay home. So they hook Antoine up to a calf. The first time, he gets violently ill. His body is screaming, "Please stop putting cow DNA into my veins." But Denis is like, "Nah, we just need a bigger dose." On the second infusion, Antoine goes into full allergic shock. His urine turns black. He is in agony, but he recovers. And this is where it gets truly insane. Antoine's wife drags him back for a third round. Denis actually hesitates this time, but the wife insists. They hook him up, and Antoine dies the next night. Denis is immediately charged with manslaughter. The medical elites in Paris who hated him are celebrating. They finally got him. But during the trial, a dark secret comes out. It turns out Antoine didn't die from the cow blood. I mean, the cow blood definitely didn't help. But the actual cause of death was arsenic. His wife had been slowly poisoning him the whole time because she was tired of his partying. Denis is legally cleared, but the damage is done. The court bans blood transfusions for centuries. So, because one guy had an inferiority complex and another guy had a wife who hated him, medical science was set back about 200 years. But if you think French doctors are crazy, wait until you hear about what was happening in ancient Japan. When you think of a Buddhist monk, you probably picture a peaceful guy meditating under a tree, trying to achieve nirvana. But in ancient Japan, some monks decided that regular meditation was for casuals. They wanted to achieve enlightenment by literally turning themselves into mummies while they were still alive. This practice is called Sokushinbutsu, and it is easily one of the most disturbing experiments in human endurance ever recorded. The goal is to leave behind a corpse that doesn't decay, proving you have become a living Buddha. And the process takes years of pure torture. It starts with a diet called mokujiki, which translates to tree eating. For 1,000 days, the monk stops eating rice or wheat and only eats pine needles, tree bark, and seeds. Imagine going to a restaurant and ordering a salad. But the chef just sweeps the forest floor onto your plate. That is your life now. This diet is designed to burn away all your body fat and, more importantly, to starve the bacteria in your stomach that would normally cause your body to rot after you die. You are literally sanitizing yourself from the inside out. After 3 years of eating like a termite, the monk stops eating food altogether. He only drinks salted water for 100 days while meditating. By the end of this, the guy is basically a skeleton wrapped in dried skin. He is weak, he is dying, and he is ready for the final step. His disciples dig a hole 9 feet deep. They lower the monk into the pit inside a pine box. They give him a small bamboo tube for air and a bell. Then they bury him alive. He sits in total darkness, meditating. And every day he rings the bell to let the guys upstairs know, hey, I'm still suffering down here. The disciples listen every day, ring. And then, one day, the ringing stops. The disciples remove the air tube and seal the tomb completely. They leave him there for another 1,000 days. Then, they dig him up to check his work. If the body has rotted, well, sorry, bro, you failed. You just died in a hole for nothing. But if the body is preserved, you are declared a Buddha. They dress you up in fancy robes and put your corpse on display in the temple for people to worship. The craziest part? This was legal until the late 19th century. The last guy to try it, a monk named Bukai, did it illegally in 1903. His disciples were so scared of getting arrested for assisting a suicide that they left him in the ground and never checked on him. He stayed buried for 60 years until researchers dug him up in 1961. And guess what? He nailed it. Perfectly mummified. He spent 60 years waiting for his unboxing video, but he finally achieved enlightenment. Now, let's jump forward to the 20th century, where the United States military decided to get into the ghost business. It is the Vietnam War, and things are not going well for the Americans. The Viet Cong are masters of guerrilla warfare. They are everywhere and nowhere. The American soldiers are terrified of booby traps and ambushes. So, the U.S. command decides that since they can't beat the enemy with bullets, they are going to try to beat them with ghosts. See, in Vietnam, there is a deep cultural belief that if you die away from home and aren't buried properly, your soul is doomed to wander the earth in pain forever. It is a terrifying concept for the locals. The U.S. Army, being the sensitive cultural anthropologists that they are, decides to weaponize this. They launch Operation Wandering Soul. They go into the studio and hire South Vietnamese actors to record the most terrifying audio imaginable. They create a track called Ghost Tape Number 10. It starts with creepy Buddhist funeral music and the sound of crying. Then a voice comes on. It sounds distorted and distant, claiming to be a dead Viet Cong soldier. He says things like, "My body is gone. I am dead. Go home, my friends, before it is too late." He talks about living in a hell of fire and pain. It is basically a horror movie soundtrack designed to induce a mental breakdown. The plan is simple. They strap giant loudspeakers to helicopters and fly over the jungle at night, blasting these ghost noises down at the enemy. Imagine you are a Viet Cong soldier. You are sleeping in a tunnel, exhausted, and suddenly the sky starts screaming at you. The voice of your dead comrade is telling you to run away. It is psychological torture on a massive scale. So, did it work? Well, kind of, but mostly no. See, the Viet Cong figured out pretty quickly that ghosts don't usually fly around in American helicopters. They knew it was a trick. In fact, it backfired spectacularly. Whenever the Americans played the tape, the Viet Cong would just get annoyed and start shooting at the loudspeakers. So, instead of scaring them away, the ghosts just drew a massive amount of anti-aircraft fire, revealing the American positions. The only people who actually got freaked out were the South Vietnamese allies, fighting alongside the Americans. They heard the tapes and were terrified, begging their commanders to turn it off. So, the U.S. military spent millions of dollars to create a spooky mixtape that ended up scaring their own friends and giving the enemy a target practice beacon. Great job, guys! But sometimes, disturbing experiments aren't about medicine or war. Sometimes, they are just about bad engineering. Let's go back to Japan for a second, to the era of castle building. You are a feudal lord. You want to build a massive castle to show everyone how rich and powerful you are. But there is a problem. The walls keep falling down. The foundation is weak. The ground is unstable. You could hire a better architect or maybe use better materials. But no, you decide the logical solution is human sacrifice. This practice is called Hitobashira, or human pillar. The idea is that if you bury a person alive inside the foundation or the wall of a building, their spirit will hold the structure up. It is like using a soul as rebar. And the most famous story of this comes from Marwoka Castle. The lord of the castle is frustrated. Every time they build the stone wall, it collapses. His advisors tell him, "Look, the gods are angry. We need a sacrifice." They find a poor, one-eyed woman named Oshizu. She is a peasant. She has 2 kids, and she is desperate. The Lord makes her a deal. He says, "If you let us bury you alive under the castle, I promise I will make your son a samurai." For a peasant woman, this is a huge offer. It means her son will have a life of honor and wealth instead of dying in the mud. So Oshizu agrees. She steps into the hole. They pile stones around her. They crush her to death and seal her inside the foundation. And, amazingly, the wall stands. The sacrifice worked. The castle is completed in 1576. Oshizu died thinking her sacrifice secured her children's future. But here is the kick in the teeth. The lord who made the promise gets transferred to another province shortly after. He leaves, and he forgets all about the deal. Oshizu's son never becomes a samurai. He is left an orphan. Legend says that Oshizu's spirit was, understandably, extremely pissed off. Every year, during the spring rains, the moat around the castle would overflow. The locals called it the Tears of Oshizu. They say you could hear a woman crying in the rain, cursing the liars who crushed her under a pile of rocks for nothing. History is full of these moments. People pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable, usually at the expense of someone who didn't have a say in the matter. Whether it is pumping a party animal full of cow blood, burying a mom to hold up a wall, or starving yourself to turn into a statue. It seems that the human drive to experiment is often just a fancy word for being absolutely unhinged. And if you think these stories are crazy, you haven't heard anything yet. Because for every genius who changed the world with a brilliant invention, there is another guy who thought he could fly to the moon by strapping rockets to a chair. But that is a story for another time.